G'day, I'm Paul. So, Cupra, they haven't been on sale in Australia for very long, but they do want to bring the wagon back, and they're considering bringing this to Australia. It's called the Cupra Leon Sportstourer, and this is available in a hot version. It basically replaces the Golf R in Australia. So today we're checking out the plug-in hybrid, which is this one here, plus also the faster one as well to see if they're any good, and hopefully they will bring them to Australia. Doesn't really have that many competitors in Australia when you think about it. A wagon that can be plug-in hybrid or all-wheel drive sort of fastness. I think it is pretty unique in that sense. So we don't know pricing, we don't really know much today. It'll just be a brief overview and a bit of a drive, and then I'll be keen on your feedback on whether they should actually bring this to Australia. If you do want to skip ahead to other parts of this video, please use the time codes that are on the screen, or if you are on YouTube, scroll down and use the chapters below. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so you can find out every single time we drive a matte coloured car. So let's start off with the design. I love the look of this, especially with the matte paint. They do love a matte paint and it works really well, especially with those copper highlights. I think that all looks pretty nice. So depending on the spec you go for, you have full LED headlights. Matrix LED lights are optional as well, with LED fog lights down the bottom there as well. Big intake here for cooling because, like I mentioned, this is plug-in hybrid and also available in effectively a Golf R replacement. So turbo 4, all-wheel drive, 0 to 100 in under 5 seconds. Like, it is pretty quick stuff, so it needs a fair bit of cooling. And I've also noticed as well in the latest Tavascan, they have the emblem up the top here on the bonnet, but it's backlit with LEDs, which I think is cool. So they are really focusing on their lighting game. We'll jump over here to the wheels. So I like, again, the copper highlights here. They've kind of owned the copper theme and it works really well. So 235s on the front with 19s. Have a look at these brakes as well. Available with a big old set of Brembos. They're 370mm cross-drilled rotors. So gives you a bit of an idea of the intent behind the car. It is meant to be go fast, and they're fitting it with the kit that makes it go fast as well, which is pretty cool. Down here, you've got some aero down the side there. This has a carbon package on it, so carbon back seats and also carbon mirrors there as well, but obviously that may not come to Australia. Being a wagon, look at this, you have so much storage space, which is good news. Come around to the back with me. Now around the back here, full LED tail light, so that stretches all the way along here. The Cupra badge here, which you push to open, individual Cupra lettering there as well, and then twin pipes down the bottom here. It is actually interesting, there is a version of the Formentor, the SUV that we tested recently, that I was pretty damn impressed with. They sell a version here that's left-hand drive only that has the engine out of the RS3. It sounds unreal. So I think it just shows you that Cupra is the child in the Volkswagen Group family that has access to all of this technology and really wants to take advantage of using as much of it as they possibly can. So let me know what you reckon about the design in the comments section below. Do you think you need a wagon, or are you just going to go an SUV? I'm keen to see what you think. So we are inside the Sportstourer. Let's start off with just what this looks like. And I think the thing that Cupra does really well is just giving a bit of style and substance to Volkswagen products. And look, to be honest, sometimes Volkswagen products can be a little bit boring, and I think this really just pushes it up a bit and just makes it a whole lot more interesting. So this is what the key looks like. You can see it's got that carbon fiber material, or the carbon fiber pattern on the back there with the Cupra logo. Then on the front you have lock, boot, and unlock, and it's like a rubber finish on that. It's proximity touch key, so you can leave that in your pocket. Then once you're inside, you have the push button start on the steering wheel, so slightly different location. And then outside of that, the actual cabin itself is presented nicely with the stitching along the dashboard there, and this sort of textured material along there with a big infotainment system in the center section as well. So in terms of your touch points and build quality and all that sort of stuff, we will wait until this potentially arrives in Australia and do a proper check of it all then. But just based on what we've seen here, it actually all looks pretty good. Infotainment system is a 12-inch display, so it's mounted up high. It kind of is like a tablet attached to the dashboard there, and then you have this swipe bar beneath. And look, I'm not a huge fan of this swipe bar because it is just a little bit clumsy to use. Like stuff like putting your temperature up and down, you've got to be quite precise with your inputs. Same with the volume. There is no just easy way to do volume up and down over here. You have to use the steering wheel for that. Outside of that though, it is actually pretty easy to use and quite straightforward. We did a tour yesterday of the Cupra headquarters where they showed us the Tavascan's new infotainment system, which is a 15-inch infotainment system, and that is significantly better than this in terms of the way that it works and the layout and that kind of stuff. So I think over time they will just start rolling out updates to these systems to refine them and to put in the learnings that they have from the bigger infotainment systems that they're working on. Head of the driver, you also have a digital display, and it's actually quite a good system because kind of like the Audi system as well, you can change between the different layouts that you see on the screen, and then you can configure a lot of that to show what you want it to show. And as you switch between the drive modes as well, that all lights up and does fun stuff. So they've done a really good job with that. Now let's talk about comfort. So you've got dual zone automatic climate control. I mentioned before, it's controlled up here, and then you have a separate screen for all of the climate control settings. You've also got heated seats and a heated steering wheel as well. In terms of the seats, this is something else that Cupra does really well. They just go to town with designing these incredible looking seats. So you have the Cupra logo up the top there. They hug you in nicely. They have a lot of definition to them, and yeah, they just look like they're out of a spaceship, and I think really suit the characteristic of this car. So that is a pretty impressive setup. Steering wheel is manually adjustable and offers both tilt and reach adjustment as well. And on the reach test, all of this stuff is easy to reach while you're driving. Now, second row, what's it like? It is worth pointing out these seats, these are like a top spec seat, which means they have the sort of carbon back on them, and it means you don't get any sort of mat pockets, but you actually have a reasonable amount of knee room there. Toe room's great, headroom's really good too. Just shows you don't need to go for a massive SUV to get that space. This is a fairly sort of small station wagon, but you still have plenty of room here for adults, which is really good to see. Other creature comforts, you've got a third zone of climate control. You have 2 USB-C ports. You have air vents here as well. You've also got 2 USB-C ports up the front and a 12-volt outlet, along with a wireless phone charging too. There's a center armrest here with a couple of cup holders, and then ski port entry to the boot as well. It's actually a pretty sort of nice place. It is interesting here, they're allowed to have seats in the front row, and you can see there's actually a top tether down there as well, which you don't really get in Australia. So yeah, pretty good here in terms of space. Let's check out the boot. Okay, so let's talk cargo space. We'll crack this open. Look at this. You push the Cupra logo, and then it pops up like that. So you have a little less space in the plug-in hybrid version, but it still is a pretty decent amount. So it's just under 500 litres here before you drop the second row. And you also get a little bit of storage down here for things like your cable if you need to. Storage off to the sides as well, along with a 12-volt outlet over there too. 150 litres is the extra amount you'll find in the regular version. So it is slightly compromised here because of the 12-ish kilowatt-hour battery. But you can expand the space if you want to. You can drop the second row out of the way by pulling these two things. That expands the space to around 1,500 litres here in the plug-in hybrid version, and then 150 litres extra if you go for the non-plug-in hybrid. Now, before we go for a spin, I want to run you through the charging options available here for the plug-in hybrid. So it is just AC charging. Battery size is around 12 kilowatt hours, and it'll charge at around 3.6 kilowatts. Driving range of about 50 to 60 kilometres on electricity alone, and then a combined fuel economy of around 2 litres per 100 Ks. So gives you an idea of what you can expect from this as a plug-in hybrid. Okay, so we've just hit the road in the Leon Sportstourer, the plug-in hybrid version. This is like other plug-in hybrid vehicles where it uses an internal combustion engine that mates to an electric motor and then also a bigger battery than what you would find in a small or a mild hybrid. In this case, I mentioned before, it's around a 12 kilowatt hour battery, and it is mated to an electric motor that services the front wheels. This is only a front wheel drive. So under the bonnet is a 1.4 litre turbocharged petrol engine. It makes 110 kilowatts of power and 250 newton meters of torque on its own. And then that's mated to an 85 kilowatt electric motor that produces 330 newton meters of torque. So it is a fairly sort of healthy little combination there. When those two combine, it's 180 kilowatts of power and 400 newton meters of torque. And that means when you step on the throttle, it gives you a really nice push in the back. It kind of feels like a diesel in terms of the way that it pulls, because you're getting the internal combustion engine plus the electric motor kicking in to really sort of yank it along nicely. So the whole package works fairly well. You do notice though, when it is out of battery like other plug-in hybrids, that it can be just a little bit fussy at times. So if the engine is switched off when it's coasting and then you go for the throttle, it can be just a little bit jerky when it decides that it wants to switch on or switch off. So that can be a little bit frustrating, but it is something that you do get used to as an owner. The other benefit of a plug-in hybrid as well, while you're getting around sort of 50 or 60 kilometers of range, it is that you're silently motoring along when it is in full electric mode. You don't have any interruption from the internal combustion engine, which you do find in stuff like a RAV4 hybrid. That will always be on and off, and you'll always be hearing it doing things because it can't run on electricity alone for long periods of time. So that's where this system actually benefits from being able to charge it overnight, and then you've got that 60 kilometres of driving. The average Australian only ends up doing about 30 kilometres of driving a day, so it is the perfect amount for that type of thing. But there is always that sort of thing in the back of your mind. You're using an engine, you're then lugging batteries around, an electric motor. So when it comes to servicing, you've got the added complexity of all of these systems in there. But if it does serve the purpose of saving you fuel, then that is a side benefit of it all. Now, how does it all feel while we're sort of just driving along here? So we've spent a couple of days now driving these, and typically the Spanish roads we've been on have been excellent. So as a result of that, everything feels really nice. This, on the other hand, is now a bit of a choppier section of road. And look, the ride is okay, but it's not amazing. It is sort of fairly firm. You've got to remember that this is sitting on fairly low profile tyres, and at the end of the day, that is going to give you that very firm sort of feel behind the wheel if you do end up in sort of city streets like this where there are a lot of bumps and cobblestones. All of this is mated to a 6-speed dual clutch transmission, and for the most part it works okay, but again, if you do catch it napping when the engine is switched off and it's running on electricity alone and then it needs to fire back up, it can be just a little bit stuttery and clunky sometimes, and that is one of the downsides of a dual clutch transmission. They just don't love being surprised or hills and that kind of thing. I will reserve judgment until we actually have a proper drive back in Australia, but that is if it arrives in Australia. But to me, the dual clutch transmission just feels like other dual clutches that I've tested before. Now let's talk about the one that you're probably all excited for, and that is the Sportstourer with the VZ engine, and that is the Golf R engine effectively. It is an absolute missile, and we're not driving that right now, but I did drive it yesterday. It hauls because it is all-wheel drive, and it uses a similar version to the Golf R's engine, which is a 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine. Makes around 220 kilowatts of power, 400 newton meters of torque, and it's mated to a 7-speed dual clutch transmission. And then of course it has the surety there of the all-wheel drive system. When you pack all of that together, it really just results in you getting pinned back in the seat and getting a big smile on your face. It sounds good too. Cupra actually announced that they have optional Akrapovic exhausts that you can fit to their vehicles, and if it does come to Australia, I'm hoping that that is available as an option, because it's such a great sounding engine when it does have a good quality exhaust fitted to it, and it's a big smile inducer. So sorry, this video is going to be a little bit funny because we don't really have a great deal of B-roll, and unfortunately I'm sitting here driving around the streets because I had to film closer to the end of the day, so it's just going to be a bit of talking from me. We will have a proper drive of these if and when they do come to Australia. In terms of visibility from the wagon, it's actually really good. The envelope out the back is great. I can see clearly out the side mirrors. You've got these sections here that light up when you have cars in your blind spot, also when you're exiting the vehicle. So there are sort of really good examples here of using LEDs to get the driver on board with what's happening and to make sure they're fully aware of their surroundings. So they've integrated all of that really nicely. And it is an easy car to drive as well. Like, you've got a good quality reverse camera. It's super simple to park, front and rear parking sensors. There really isn't too much of anything to fuss about. Now let's talk about fuel economy for these two. So for the petrol non-hybrid version, it's around 8 litres per 100 k's, whereas here for the hybrid version, we're talking 1.4 litres per 100 k's, which is really not a whole lot of fuel. So it's quite an impressive amount. Whether you get that in practice or not depends entirely on if you're charging the vehicle constantly, and if you are charging the vehicle constantly, you are going to get that net benefit of having it use not a lot of fuel, because it will run on electricity alone until it needs to fire up the petrol engine. And if you don't travel long enough for that to happen, then you're not going to end up using any fuel. Once you do reach the point where the battery is empty, it ends up kicking on the internal combustion engine, and it supports the hybrid system. There's always a little bit of battery left in there to give you that boost as you're driving, so it is actually a pretty decent setup in terms of being able to drive it without having to think too much about whether you've charged the car or not. So that has been your first look at the Leon Sportstourer, potentially coming to Australia in plug-in hybrid, and also the Go Fast Golf R replacement wagon trim. That's what I'm calling it anyway. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure you like it and share it with your mates. Sorry it couldn't be more exciting. Unfortunately, we didn't really have the best opportunity to film, so this is what we've been able to put together. But when it does come to Australia, and if it does come to Australia, we're going to test it where we regularly test our cars to see exactly how this thing performs. And if you haven't done so already, please make sure you subscribe to our channel. But until next time, see ya.